Bloody Roar, a bloody wild franchise. It was a series like no other, an electrifying spectacle where fighters transformed into ferocious, untamed beasts mid-battle, fusing traditional martial arts with primal animalistic power. Imagine Tekken colliding with Altered Beast, and you get the magic of Bloody Roar. These games captured the hearts of gamers with visceral combat, fluid animations, and a cast of unforgettable characters that ooze charm and intensity. But just when this epic series seemed ready to roar into the big leagues, it vanished, gone, leaving fans with nothing but burning questions and the distant echo of what could have been. Why did Bloody Roar disappear so suddenly, and why are we still waiting for its triumphant return? Well folks, strap in, because today we're diving deep into the rise and fall of this legendary franchise. Hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. This is the story of Bloody Roar. Yeah! Fighting games are amazing, aren't they? But do you know what's even better than regular fighting games? Dirt cheap fighting games! Through the links I've posted down below, I can get you 48% off Street Fighter 6, 57% off of Tekken 8, and a huge discount off of the recently released epic Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection. Get up to 90% off thousands of AAA, modern, indie and retro games simply by using my links via the pinned comment. Happy shopping! The Bloody Roar series was a beloved staple of polygonal fighting games in the late 90s and the early 2000s, often mentioned alongside heavyweights like Tekken and Soul Calibur. While we've seen new Tekken and Soul Calibur games in recent years, poor Bloody Roar has been left in the dust. Despite its clear popularity and dedicated fanbase, dropped a whopping 20 years ago, which means fans have been waiting for a new entry even longer than the infamous wait for Nintendo to localize Mother 3. It's been a bloody long time to say the least. So with all of this said, let's head 27 years into the past to revisit the birth of these games. So the year is 1997, and polygonal fighting games are dominating both arcade and the Sony PlayStation. The Tekken trilogy was captivating players worldwide with its smooth, intuitive gameplay, while Namco's weapon-based fighter Soul Edge became a runaway hit. And let's not forget how massive Virtua Fighter had become in Japan, helping the Sega Saturn outsell the Nintendo 64 in the region, a testament to just how influential these games were in the console wars of that era. With fighting games driving console sales and capturing players' imaginations, it was no shock that new franchises kept emerging. Among these was the ferocious Bloody Roar, storming both arcades and the PlayStation, ready to stake its claim in this booming genre. The original arcade release of Bloody Roar, or Bloody Roar Hyper Beast Duel as it was known in Europe and Japan, and Beasterizer in North America, arrived adding yet another combatant to the fighting game space. Developed by Raising, a studio that had previously specialised in arcade shoot-em-ups, a strategic move was made to capitalise on the genre's growing popularity. The sales and distribution of these arcade cabinets were handled by Eighting, with both Eighting and Raising consisting of former staff from Compile, a company also known for its shoot-em-ups. This transition from shooters to fighting games marked a big departure from their previous work. However, arcades were of course not the only place that Bloody Roar was destined to be found. A PlayStation port of the game was entrusted to Hudson Soft to take care of, with fortunately both the arcade and console versions being met with critical acclaim on release. During this video I of course want to talk about both versions as well as the first game's many sequels, but before we get to that, let's take a moment to explore what made Bloody Roar stand out in such a fierce competitive field of fighting games in the first place. At a time when polygonal fighting games were flooding the market, Bloody Roar introduced a unique twist that made it impossible to forget. So what set it apart from the crowd? The answer of course lies in its brilliant gimmick. Fighters could transform mid-battle into powerful beasts. Those who have played these games will be more than aware that this mechanic was more than just a flashy feature. It tapped into something primal that hooked players instantly. But why did this transformation idea resonate so deeply? When it comes to such a premise, we'd seen transformations making waves before. Just think of Altered Beast. Despite its relatively mediocre gameplay, Altered Beast became legendary thanks to its memorable transformations, so much so that it became a pack-in title for the Sega Mega Drive. But here's the real question, could Bloody Roar take this gimmick, pair it with gameplay on par with Tekken and visuals that dazzled to create something truly iconic? Well personally, I think they did. This fusion of beastly transformations and tight arcade quality fighting was a stroke of genius. It not only helped Bloody Roar stand out in a sea of fighters, but it also ensured the game made decent money and remains talked about today despite the series being seemingly dead. So whose idea was this memorable series anyway? The mastermind behind the arcade version, Susumu Hibi of Raising, clearly had the vision. Having previously worked on the beloved Bomberman series at Hudson Soft, Hibi brought that expertise when partnering with Hudson's Kenji Fukuya to ensure the PlayStation port lived up to expectations. But was this dynamic duo the secret ingredient that helped Bloody Roar shine across platforms? Or was it the sheer excitement of those mid-battle transformations that kept players coming back for more? The answer might be a bit of both. No matter which version of Bloody Roar you pick up, one thing's for certain, you're in for a beastly good time. So let's dig deeper. The game centers around a fascinating story of warriors known as zoanthropes, individuals with the extraordinary ability to transform into half-human, half-animal beasts. But what drives these fierce fighters, and why do they possess such wild powers? At the heart of the narrative is the shadowy Tylon Corporation, a classic villainous organisation with sinister plans to weaponize zoanthropes for global domination. But here's where it gets interesting. Many of the fighters have deeply personal vendettas against Tylon, making the battle for freedom more than just a simple fight. It's about survival and revenge. Take Yugo, for example, a wolf zoanthrope determined to avenge his father, who was killed trying to stop Tylon's plans. Along his journey, Yugo crosses paths with Gado, a French lion zoanthrope, a military mastermind who once fought alongside Yugo's father. The two join forces vowing to bring down Tylon and free zoanthropes from their nightmarish experiments. But can they really succeed against such a powerful corporation, or will their animalistic strength fall short? Well, I guess it depends on how well you can play this game. Next up in the Bloody Roar roster, we have Bakuryu, a mole zoanthrope and a master of assassination who fancies himself as a ninja expert. But what lies beneath his shadowy persona? Is it just skill that drives him, or something more sinister? Then there's Mitsuko Nonomura, a wild sow zoanthrope who might seem like an everyday housewife, until you learn she's out for blood, seeking revenge after the kidnapping of her daughter. How far will a mother go to reclaim her child? Mitsuko's story adds a surprising layer of heart and ferocity to the game. Adding to the colourful lineup, we also have Jin Long, a Chinese tiger zoanthrope who carries the weight of a tragic past. With his mother and younger sister both passing away during his childhood, Jin's inner turmoil is as fierce as the tiger within him. Particularly memorable, we have Alice Tsugami, a rabbit zoanthrope who has a history that's equally heartbreaking. Kidnapped and experimented on by Tylon as a child, Alice's gentle exterior hides a survivor's strength. But does her soft-spoken nature mask a desire for vengeance, or has she already made peace with her past? We also meet Gregory Jones, an American guerrilla zoanthrope and retired ringmaster. What brings this strong man into the fray? Perhaps the call of battle is too loud to ignore, or maybe he has his own reasons for getting involved in this beastly war. Lastly, we have Hans Turberman, an English fox zoanthrope with a twisted mind. Obsessed with his own beauty and filled with disdain for anything he deems ugly, Hans bears more than a passing resemblance to Street Fighter II's Vega. But how deep does his vanity go, and will his arrogance be his undoing? With such a colourful cast of characters, each with their own unique motivations and dark histories, Bloody Roar doesn't just offer thrilling transformations in combat, it weaves together a tapestry of stories, leaving you to wonder what drives these fighters to unleash the beasts within, and how far will they go to settle their scores. One thing is clear, it's all jolly good fun. As for this lovable lineup, each brings their own unique playstyle to Bloody Roar, and a layer of depth that keeps the gameplay fresh. But if players manage to fight their way through the brutal competition, they face a final chilling encounter with Yuriko, the secret weapon of the sinister Tylon Corporation. This young girl, brainwashed by Tylon, harbours the terrifying ability to transform into the powerful Chimera Zoanthrope, serving up as a final challenge for engaged players. As for playing this one, Bloody Roar utilises a 5-button control scheme that's deceptively simple yet packed with possibilities. 3 buttons are dedicated to punch, kicking, and the game's signature beast function. By combining these inputs in various sequences, players can unleash a wide array of moves, including throws that keep opponents on their toes. The real magic, however, lies in the beast button. This button connects to the beast bar located just beneath each fighter's health bar. As the bar fills up, players can press the beast button to trigger a dramatic transformation, morphing into their more powerful animal form. But here's the real kicker. This isn't just for show. The transformation begins with a shock wave that pushes opponents away, and once fully transformed, the beast button becomes an integral part of your combat arsenal. But there's a catch. Every attack performed in beast mode drains the beast gauge, creating a strategic balancing act. How much damage can you dish out before the meter runs dry? Will you go all out for a quick victory, or play it safe, preserving your beast form for as long as possible? The choice is yours, but will help determine your fate. With these transformations and a layer of tactical depth, Bloody Roar forces players to think fast, fight smart, and unleash their inner beast at just the right moment. In Bloody Roar, Beast Mode offers more than just a flashy transformation and extra power. Activating it comes with significant advantages, like recovering a portion of your health and unlocking the Rave button. As for this function, the Rave button is a game changer, as it eliminates recovery time between combos and gives characters lightning fast speed, making them 10 times quicker. But there's a price to pay. It drains your beast bar rapidly, so the question becomes, is it worth the gamble to unleash this speed demon mode at the right moment? Like most fighting games, matches in Bloody Roar are fought in best of 3 rounds, with each round ending in a knockout when an opponent's life bar is fully depleted. But what makes Bloody Roar stand out is the balance between offensive and defensive strategies, giving players multiple ways to approach combat. The 5th button in the game is dedicated to cancelling, which opens up a world of defensive possibilities. Players can pull off guard attacks, slower but more defensive moves, or execute guard escapes by sidestepping after blocking an attack. This has more strategy. For example, do you stand your ground and block, risking a guard escape, or do you keep moving? Players can also duck to avoid mid and high attacks, but doing so leaves them vulnerable to low attacks, making defense as crucial as offense. Another feature that adds to all of this is the air recovery system. If you're launched into the air by an opponent, under certain conditions you can perform an air recovery, giving you a chance to bounce back and keep fighting. There is a lot to think about for those who have invested a lot of time into this game and want to play it competitively. Adding to this title's legacy, the home versions of Bloody Roar didn't stop at arcade and versus modes. It packed in extras like time attack, survival and practice modes, offering plenty of variety for players looking to hone their skills. And to keep things fresh, the game also included a slew of quirky unlockables, just enough to keep players hooked and coming back for more. With so many ways to approach combat, between beast transformations, rave mode and defensive tactics, Bloody Roar isn't just a button mashing brawler. It requires strategy, quick thinking and mastery of its deep mechanics, which when paired with unexpected unlockables, it keeps things fresh and fun. Players can customize their characters in wild ways, like making them giant, giving them comically oversized arms, or even slapping on a big head, reminiscent of the goofy unlockables in GoldenEye 007 for the Nintendo 64. But that's just the beginning. There's also the after image mode, where characters fight with a shadowy double trailing behind them, and a cool visual effect. And if that's not enough, you could change camera angles, enlarging the arena sizes, turning off the lighting for dramatic flair, or even dressing Alice up in a sailor suit. The game's full of little surprises that make you want to keep exploring what else it has up its sleeve. IGN praised the PlayStation version, writing, "This game is a tight, playable fighter that ranks in the very upper tier of brawlers on any system. And after playing this to death, my favourite N64 fighter, Fighter's Destiny, pales in comparison. High praise indeed, but it's easy to see why the game made such an impact." IGN continued, "The animal transformations proved to be more than just a good marketing ploy too. Besides being visually enticing, the beasts pack an entire arsenal of blinding kick-ass moves special to their animal side. Add to that the rave button, which doubles your strength, and you've got yourself a game to play for months to come." Visually, the game didn't hold back either. Graphically, the game is sweet, they noted, highlighting the great shadow effects, detailed textures in both the backgrounds and the characters themselves, and a bizarre yet likeable cast of fighters. Bloody Roar wasn't just well received, it was hailed as one of the most original and exciting fighting games of 1997. GameSpot in particular praised its innovative mechanics, stating, "Bloody Roar may look like a pretty plain fighting game at first glance, but with one tap of the beast button, all that changes." GameSpot continued, "The game runs fast and very smoothly. The game's moves are also very dynamic, resulting in a lot of oohs and ahs as a wolf bites a chunk out of his opponent's neck, and blood spurts everywhere, splattering on the ground. It wasn't just about speed or style, Bloody Roar had a raw, visceral quality that set it apart." Sushi X from Electronic Gaming Monthly echoed this sentiment, praising the visuals. The game's visuals definitely look good, but to see these characters engage in flashy combat is even more impressive. The transformation, animations and fluid combat made for a thrilling spectacle. Next Generation magazine also gave the PlayStation version a glowing review, rating it 4 out of 5 stars. They emphasised that while the game might lack a certain stylistic flair, it more than made up for it with its rock-solid gameplay. Overall, Bloody Roar has solid gameplay and excellent graphics, even if it doesn't have any sense of style, and we'll take raw gameplay over style any day. This positively received debut laid a strong foundation for the Bloody Roar franchise, which would go on to spawn several sequels. The series' success even extended beyond video games with a manga adaptation published in monthly Shonen Jump, further cementing its cultural relevance. And the franchise's star Yugo didn't just stay within the Bloody Roar universe. He appeared as a playable character in the 2003 crossover fighting game DreamWorks TV World Fighters. However, before this was to take place, there would of course be more Bloody Roar games, so let's talk about them. Less than 2 years after the wild success of Bloody Roar, developers Eighting and Raisin, also known for cult favourites like Terror Diver, were back with a beastly follow-up. In 1999, they released their second polygonal fighting game, Bloody Roar 2 Bringer of the New Age, in Europe and Japan, while in North America it was marketed as Bloody Roar 2 The New Breed. The question was, could they capture the magic of the first game and push the series to new heights? Let's find out. In terms of story, Bloody Roar 2 takes place 5 years after the events of the original. The Zoanthropes, who once fought against the evil Tylon Corporation, have since settled into relatively peaceful lives. Well, as peaceful as things can get when you can transform into an animal at will, anyway. But that peace is shattered when the existence of Zoanthropes is revealed to the world, sparking fear, tension and hostility between humans and Zoanthropes. Sounds familiar? It's a classic tale of fear and misunderstanding, but this time with furries. Jokes aside, this revelation leads to chaos as humans, terrified of these animalistic beings, lash out. In response, a radical faction known as the Zoanthrope Liberation Front, or ZLF, rises up, pushing for Zoanthrope supremacy. These proud boys of the furry world believe that Zoanthropes are superior to humans, and they aren't just at odds with normies, they even despise other Zoanthropes who don't share their extreme views. As for the character development in Bloody Roar 2, Alan Gaddo, once a staunch advocate for peace and understanding between Zoanthropes and humans, has suddenly become a fugitive, and no one's quite sure why. As the world teeters on the edge of chaos, several rebel Zoanthropes find themselves caught in a battle, not only with the radical Zoanthrope Liberation Front, but also against Gaddo himself. With the fate of both species in their hands, the stakes couldn't be higher. Let's be honest, the story is basically an X-Men ripoff, a narrative centered around marginalized beings facing conflict with the majority, a theme well worn in both comics and media. It's a classic allegory for real-world social issues, and yet, despite its familiar roots, it works. Now, as for the rest of the story around this game, you won't believe who's pulling the strings behind the ZLF. It turns out the leader of a furry uprising is none other than Shenlong, perhaps the same guy players have been told they need to defeat to stand a chance in Street Fighter 2 for all these years. But here's where things get even more wild. Shenlong himself is merely a puppet, controlled by none other than Hajime Busuzima, the so-called right-hand man of the ZLF. So who's really calling the shots here? Is the fight against the ZLF just smoke and mirrors, or something darker? Keeping these questions in mind, it is clear that Bloody Roar 2 doesn't just dive deeper into the Zoanthrope universe. It brings with it a story full of political tension, social divides, and fur-fueled drama. It's basically 2024 in a nutshell. Yuck. So while Bloody Roar 2 may tread familiar ground with its X-Men inspired narrative, it's the unexpected twists, political undercurrents, and shocking role reversals that help keep players intrigued. Of course, in fighting games, the roster of playable characters often holds more weight than the story itself though. So what did Bloody Roar 2 bring to the table that set it apart from its predecessor? In a bold and risky move, only 4 characters from the original game made a return. Yugo, the Wolf Zoanthrope, Alice the Rabbit, Long the Tiger, and Gaddo the Lion, who we've already touched on when discussing the story. The rest of the roster? All new, giving players plenty of fresh faces to experiment with in combat. 7 brand new fighters entered the fray, expanding the possibilities in every battle. These include Stun, the intimidating insect, Sheena, the fierce leopard, Hajime, the tricky chameleon, Jenny, the alluring bat, and more. With such a diverse lineup, Bloody Roar 2 didn't just recycle old favourites, it gave players a wealth of new characters, each offering unique playstyles to explore. But enough about the roster, let's talk about the sequel's gameplay. The signature beast mode from the first game made its return, once again allowing characters to transform into powerful animal forms during combat. Previously known as Rage Mode, this transformation lets players execute devastating attacks, recover lost health, move faster, and deal harder blows, bringing a thrilling element to every match. But in Bloody Roar 2, the mechanics didn't stop there. New to this entry were Beast Drives, essentially Bloody Roar 2's version of super attacks. When a player performs a Beast Drive, a flashy cutscene kicks in, making the heavy damage you inflict on your opponents all the more satisfying. Each character has their own distinct Beast Drive, offering unique moves that tie into their animal forms. This gives players a chance to experiment with different characters to find which fighter and which Beast Drive suits their style best. These new gameplay features in Bloody Roar 2 led to a dramatic increase in juggling combos, adding depth far beyond what was possible in the first game. In this one, players can chain together all sorts of satisfying combos, making combat more fluid and dynamic. It's these types of improvements that likely helped Bloody Roar rise to its cult status today, with players able to not only enjoy the action but also learn and improve through the game's watch mode, allowing for deeper mastery. Speaking of modes, Bloody Roar 2 offered solid variety. There's the traditional arcade mode, familiar to any fighting game fan, where players work their way through a series of battles, culminated in a final showdown. There's also the classic versus mode for some good old-fashioned player-on-player combat, and for those who crave a challenge, Survivor mode pushes players to see how long they can last without being knocked out. But the real highlight is the story mode, where the game's plot unfolds, diving into the saga of the Zoanthropes and their conflict with the Zoanthrope Liberation Front. It's here that we get to explore the origins of each character's half-human, half-animal lifestyle, giving players a deeper understanding of Bloody Roar, or as I like to call it, Bloody Lore. Yeah. An amusing feature that returns from the first game is the fortunate comeback of Custom Mode, which lets players activate all sorts of wacky settings. Once again reminiscent of the cheat modes in GoldenEye 007, a game that was also hugely popular around the same time. Bloody Roar 2 brings back those quirky, fun elements like big head characters and after images, once again providing a layer of hilarity when playing with friends. Multiplayer couch play really was the golden era, wasn't it? While the game, in my opinion, is decent, interestingly, critics of the time seem to be much more negative regarding this game in comparison to the last. GameSpot scored Bloody Roar 2 a 6.1 out of 10, calling out its second best status due to the removal of key gameplay elements, the sidestep which they believe should have been left untouched. They wrote the problem is that it is a repeat of the first game. Gratuitous character swapping aside, little has changed from the first game, prompting the question, why bother? Why bother indeed when Bloody Roar 2 actually takes a step back and removes the ease of executing the sidestep? This complaint about the missing sidestep is interesting, as GameSpot argued that its removal made the sequel feel like a step back from a more balanced combat of the original Bloody Roar. They pointed out that the American version of the first game included the sidestep, which helped make it a balanced fighter, and removing it in the sequel led to frustration. What's even more curious is that GameSpot acknowledged that the sidestep could still be activated in custom mode. So was it really that big of an issue? For hardcore fans, maybe it was. For others, the fact that it was tucked away in a setting might have been enough to overlook its absence in the core gameplay. Regarding the controls, they added, it's hardly intuitive and only serves to give the computer an additional edge while you struggle with the controls. Without this function, Bloody Roar 2 reverts to the all-out frontal assault that the import version of the first game was. Essentially, the removal of sidestepping made the game feel more like a head-on brawler, with fewer tactical options for dodging and positioning. GameSpot continued their critique of Bloody Roar 2 by focusing on what they felt was a lack of replayability. They wrote, while the new characters are much better than the ones they replaced, and the number of available moves per character has increased, the incentive to keep on playing waned severely after a few rounds. Despite the expanded roster and movesets, they felt the game lacked the long-term appeal necessary to keep players engaged. Their comparison to the Tekken series didn't do Bloody Roar 2 any favours either. GameSpot bluntly stated, you'd be foolish to call Bloody Roar 2 a Tekken killer. It's really disappointing because it really could have been. They expressed frustration that Aiting and Raising didn't use the first game as a blueprint for something truly groundbreaking in the sequel. Instead, it seemed like the team had dropped the ball in their eyes, missing the opportunity to create a real competitor to Tekken. Perhaps the harshest blow came when GameSpot compared Bloody Roar 2 to its predecessor. In contrast to the original American version of Bloody Roar 1, Bloody Roar 2 is a marginal improvement that still suffers from second best status due to the exclusion of integral gameplay elements that should never have been messed with. The game is a major disappointment for such a promising series. Interestingly, while GameSpot had a few positive notes, their review painted a picture of a game that failed to live up to its potential. This contrasts sharply with the current perception of Bloody Roar 2 as a cult classic, demonstrating that its reputation wasn't always as glowing as it is today. Back then, the game faced harsh criticism from major outlets. Game Revolution were even more critical, scoring Bloody Roar 2 a 5 out of 10. Like many critics of the era, they didn't just have issues with the game, they seemed to be frustrated with the fighting game genre as a whole. They wrote, fighting games are becoming more and more stagnant, as everyone tries to jump on the bandwagon with a Me Too 3D fighter. Take Bloody Roar 2 for instance, borrowing heavily from other recent games, this title just doesn't stand out. Bloody Roar 2 offers nothing that hasn't been done before. Like GameSpot, Game Revolution also took issue with Bloody Roar 2's sidestepping mechanic, writing the sidestep command, which has become a standard in 3D fighters nowadays, can only be selected in the options menu. They criticised how the game borrowed control aspects from other key fighting games, but instead of seamlessly integrating them, the meshing tends to get tangled. The control scheme as a whole didn't fare much better in the review. Game Revolution noted the control style just isn't clean, making this game feel more like the button mashing variety. This critique pointed out that Bloody Roar 2 struggled to deliver the tight, precise controls that players had come to expect from top-tier fighters, leading to a more chaotic and less polished experience. In addition to gameplay mechanics, Game Revolution were unimpressed by the visual presentation and character design. They wrote, unfortunately the backgrounds feel lifeless and empty. More importantly, the fighters just lack charisma. One particularly harsh example was their take on a character's awkward dialogue. Here you get a woman rubbing her chest saying, "I love it when you fight so sexy," in a Transylvanian accent, while her character bio says she's British. This mismatch between character design, dialogue and voice acting was seen as jarring and poorly executed. They would add that Bloody Roar 2 includes second-rate voice actors and a third-rate announcer. They were especially unimpressed with the announcer, noting most of these guys sound just wrong. The announcer is completely devoid of excitement. Instead of getting pumped up for an exciting match, I felt more pumped up to go do something else. Anything else. Their final verdict? Game Revolution stated, Bloody Roar 2 is a game that you just don't want to spend that much time with. It's fine for a try or two, and nothing more. This summary paints a picture of a game that, while initially entertaining, lacked the depth or polish to hold players' attentions for long. These critiques are interesting because they contrast sharply with today's more positive view of Bloody Roar 2 as a cult favourite. The question is, was the game truly flawed, or are these early reviews missing something? While many reviewers at the time found the game lacking in control, presentation and replayability, there's also an undeniable charm that has resonated with fans over the years. Despite these scathing takes, Bloody Roar 2 wasn't without its champions. Even back in the day, some outlets offered more positive assessments, focusing on the game's unique beast transformations and fast-paced action. So perhaps the truth lies somewhere in the middle. A game with notable flaws but enough heart and innovation to earn its place as a beloved fighter in the years that followed. But what for the next entry in the series? Bloody Roar 3. As you can see, graphically, the third installment in the Bloody Roar series was graphically a big step up from what came before it. This was because not only was it built to run on the Namco System 246 arcade board, but it was also a PlayStation 2 game. Developed by 18, just like its predecessor, the third entry in the series had a different publisher, dependent on which region the game was released in. In Japan, the PlayStation version was published by Hudson Soft, whereas in North America it was handled by Activision and Virgin Interactive in Europe. In a fascinating interview with Bloody Roar 3's V-Jump books, Kenji Fukuya revealed a surprising approach to the third installment in the series. After heavily focusing on tactics and intensity in the previous games, the developers decided to take a different route this time around. Their goal? To make the game more accessible without sacrificing depth. They wanted Bloody Roar 3 to be easy but not simple, giving players more chance to make tactical decisions while ensuring it remained engaging for veterans and newcomers alike. With the power of the PlayStation 2 at their disposal, the development team had more freedom to experiment with, but they also wanted to avoid a common pitfall in fighting games: the tendency for sequels to become increasingly niche and core-focused. Instead, Fukuya and his team aimed to create a more inclusive experience without losing the strategic layers that had made the series so thrilling. But here's where things get really intriguing. There was almost a drastic change to the gameplay. Fukuya revealed that they came incredibly close to scrapping the guard button altogether, but ultimately the input survived in the final product. Hitting the PS2 in 2001, Yugo, once a fierce fighter, now finds himself at the helm of the World of Coexistence, or WOC, a non-government organisation dedicated to forging a harmonious future for both humans and zoanthropes. Alongside his trusted allies, Kenji and Alice, Yugo works tirelessly to build a world where both species can live in peace. But just as hope begins to take root, an ominous shadow looms. A mysterious mark known as the X Genome Code, or XGC, begins appearing on the bodies of the zoanthropes, and little is known about its origin or purpose. What is clear, however, is that those marks of the XGC face a terrifying fate. Desperate to stop this looming catastrophe, some zoanthropes embark on their own investigations, determined to uncover the dark truth behind the mark and free themselves from its curse. As the mystery unravels, it's revealed that the XGC is no ordinary affliction. It's a curse unleashed when the ancient artifact known as the Tabula of 1,000 Beasts was activated. The mastermind behind this chaos is Xion, a twisted zoanthrope who seeks to revive the demonic power of the Unborn, an entity of unimaginable evil, in order to exterminate the zoanthropes. As for the gameplay this time, Bloody Roar 3 introduces a refined control scheme with 6 primary buttons. While the shoulder buttons on the PlayStation 2 controller remain optional, the core commands include punch, kick, throw, the beast form button, and the sidestep maneuvers mapped to L2 and R2 for left and right sidesteps. Players can also opt for the classical double tap up or down to dodge attacks, offering multiple ways to weave through combat. The heart of the Bloody Roar series, the beast form, makes its triumphant return in Bloody Roar 3, but this time with new layers of strategy. From the start of each match, both players' meters are fully charged, allowing them to immediately transform into their beastly forms. However, the twist comes as the fighter's health dwindles. The lower the health, the faster the beast gauge fills, giving players a desperate edge when the battle seems lost. In beast form, not only can fighters recover lost health gradually, but they can also perform powerful new moves like the air cancel and unleash devastating beast drives. The guard system also gets a complete overhaul, now emphasising evasive manoeuvres with an easier to use guard escape and the newly streamlined sidestep mechanics. This gives players more chances to counterattack, making it easier to read an opponent's moves and respond with precision. But what's this air cancel all about? Exclusive to beast form, it allows players to interrupt their recovery time after being thrown into the air, chaining a quick attack on an airborne opponent. Speaking of powerful moves, the Beast Drive is essentially the game's super combo, allowing players to fully recover all their lost health in one swift move, instead of waiting for it to regenerate slowly over time. This feature, absent in previous entries, raises the stakes dramatically, and as if that weren't enough, each character now has 2 Beast Drives, with some from Bloody Roar 2 returning, with select characters like Shenlong and Sheena even hiding a secret 3rd Beast Drive, leaving players wondering what other hidden powers might be lurking beneath the surface. Then there's the Hyper Beast form, a faster, stronger version of the regular Beast form, but it only lasts for a brief window of about 12 seconds. Those few seconds can be crucial though, offering a burst of unmatched speed and strength, just enough to turn the tide in a close match. But when is the perfect moment to unleash this raw power? That's the burning question each player faces. New characters join the fray too, such as Xion the Unborn, a cold and calculating man driven by a single deadly goal, to exterminate all the zoanthropes. His zoanthrope form, the Unborn, embodies his sinister nature, making him one of the most feared figures in the game. We also have Koryu, an unlockable character, a relentless machine modelled after the original Bakuryu. Then there's Uranus, another unlockable fighter and a perfected clone of Yuriko, who is known as the strongest zoanthrope. Together, these 3 represent the darkest and most dangerous forces within the Bloody Roar universe. The PlayStation 2 version of Bloody Roar 3 garnered generally favourable reviews, according to the aggregation site Metacritic, but opinions were mixed on how the game compared to its predecessors. GamePro noted that the PS2 has been barren of a fighting game since launch, and while Bloody Roar 3 is a refreshing change of pace, it doesn't offer anything that wasn't featured in its first 2 incarnations. This assessment reflected a sense of stagnation for the long-time fans of the series. While newcomers might have found its beastly transformations and fast-paced action exhilarating, hardcore players might have been left wanting more innovation. Next Generation offered a more colourful analogy in their review, comparing the game to a hunt, asking, Hunting for the next king of the jungle in 3D fighters, you won't want to mount this one's head on your wall, but it'll keep you warm and well fed until your next big game hunt. His metaphor suggests that while Bloody Roar 3 wasn't quite a trophy game, it was still a solid entry in the genre, good enough to satisfy, but not groundbreaking. In Japan, the game received a respectable score of 29 out of 40 from Famitsu, reflecting a general appreciation for its smooth gameplay and flashy beast transformations, but also acknowledging that it didn't break new ground in the world of 3D fighters. Ultimately, Bloody Roar 3 managed to carve out its place as a fun, fast-paced fighter on the PlayStation 2, but for some it was a case of deja vu, an enjoyable experience that echoed the roar of its predecessors without quite evolving into the beast fans hoped for. The question remained, could the series unleash more, or was this the pinnacle of its primal power on the PS2? Well, the only way to answer such a question is to carry on looking at the series now. In 2002, Bloody Roar Primal Fury would hit the GameCube, with an Xbox port hitting the market the following year in 2003. Known as Bloody Roar Extreme, depending on which region and what system you played the game on, this was the first Bloody Roar game that wasn't ported to any kind of PlayStation hardware. With Kenji Fukuya at the helm, development for Bloody Roar Primal Fury kicked off shortly after the release of Bloody Roar 3 in 2001. Fukuya, leading a dedicated team of 20 programmers and 3D artists, had a clear vision for the next installment. In an interview following Bloody Roar 3's launch, Fukuya shared his excitement about taking the Hyper Beast form mechanics even further, hinting that many ideas that were scrapped during the development of the third game now had the opportunity to come to life. The decision to develop the next game for the Nintendo GameCube marked a significant moment in the series. It was the first Bloody Roar title to grace a Nintendo console. The GameCube's advanced hardware, particularly its lighting abilities, complex shading, and raw graphical power, caught the developers' attention. Fukuya and his team aimed to make Primal Fury not only the most exciting, but also the most visually stunning entry in the series to date. To achieve this, all 14 characters from Bloody Roar 3 were completely remodeled, with some of the game's most iconic arenas receiving a facelift as well. The transition to the GameCube wasn't just about graphics though. The development team simplified the combo system to make the gameplay more accessible. This change removed instances where players had to press 2 buttons simultaneously, and they also implemented a system to handle imprecise inputs, ensuring smoother gameplay when using the analog stick. Fukuya's goal was clear: build on the foundation of Bloody Roar 3, deliver a visually striking experience, and refine the mechanics to make Primal Fury an even more accessible and enjoyable game. But the question lingered: would this new approach be enough to elevate Bloody Roar to new heights on the GameCube, or would the series' core fans feel something vital was lost in the process? Only time would tell if this Primal Roar would echo louder than before. But before we look in more depth at how this game would fare, let's touch on the Xbox port in more detail too. Arriving in 2003, this version came with several key adjustments, including an updated graphics engine that enhanced the game's visuals, as well as CGI opening and ending sequences adding a cinematic flair that wasn't present in the GameCube version. Perhaps the most exciting addition for Western players was the introduction of a brand new character, Fang the Wolf, further expanding the roster and giving fans more reason to dive back into the action. In Extreme, previously unlockable characters like Kronos and Ganesha were now accessible right from the start, allowing players immediate access to some of the game's more unique fighters. However, not all changes were purely aesthetic. The gameplay itself saw some tweaks, particularly around the sidestep mechanic. In this version, the sidestep could no longer be used as an evasive maneuver, significantly altering the flow of combat and forcing players to rethink their strategies. The Xbox version certainly brought new life to the Bloody Roar universe, but its tweaks and adjustments also stirred up debates about what made the series great in the first place. Would Extreme be remembered as a roaring success, or just another evolutionary step in the franchise's primal journey? Well, let's look at other aspects of this game so you can make up your mind. As tensions between humans and zoanthropes rise, the WOC grows into a full commercial enterprise, yet zoanthropes still feel unsafe. In response, they establish the Zoanthropes Kingdom, striving for peace and equality while ensuring their own protection. On the eve of a treaty with the United Nations, King Orion, leader of the Zoanthropes, launches a fighting tournament. Many Zoanthropes enter for the prize, including Kronos, Orion's son, but others like Jenny and Gaddo join to investigate rumours of secret experiments. It's revealed that King Orion himself is behind the experiments, believing them necessary for his people's survival. His son, Kronos, had lost control in the past due to these trials. wreaking havoc on the villages. The tournament was a diversion to cover up this dark research, as the peace treaty assigned a shadowy figure watches from the sidelines, smiling evilly before vanishing, hinting that the real threat may still be lurking in the shadows. Just explained in the Primal Fury development section of this video, Bloody Roar Primal Fury retains much of the gameplay from its predecessor, Bloody Roar 3, with Beast Form and Beast Drives remaining central to the combat system. The familiar 6-button controls are enhanced with the addition of a 7th command for Hyper Beast transformations. Compared to the previous entry, combo mechanics have been simplified by removing the need to press 2 buttons simultaneously. Additionally, the arenas are now more interactive, featuring multiple rings and breakable walls and a dynamic element to battles. A key new feature is the ability to enter Hyper Beast form at any time, though doing so before your beast gauge is full will cost you your health, adding a risk-reward element to the transformation mechanic. The GameCube version of Bloody Roar Primal Fury received generally positive reviews, while the Xbox port Bloody Roar Extreme saw more mixed reactions. Critics praised the game's accessibility, with GameSpot noting how easy it was to pick up and play, and IGN highlighting the strategic depth of the beast gauge system. However, some felt the gameplay lacked innovation and depth, with complaints about its button-mashing nature and outdated fighting mechanics. The game's sound design drew criticism, with reviewers calling the guitar-heavy soundtrack outdated and mismatched with its visuals. On the Xbox, the switch from animated cutscenes to CGI was seen as a downgrade, and many felt that the graphical updates and minor gameplay tweaks weren't enough to elevate it beyond the previous entries. Overall, while fun and accessible, the series seemed to be treading familiar ground without evolving to keep up with its competitors. But did Bloody Roar 4 change perceptions? Time to find out. Bloody Roar 4 marked a major turning point in the series. Co-developed by Konami during Hudson's merger with the company, for the first time Hudson and A-Ting weren't the sole developers behind the game. So what did this shift in creative control mean for the franchise, and could the involvement of Konami take Bloody Roar in a bold new direction? Just adding to the intrigue, Bloody Roar 4 abandoned A-Ting's signature fighting engine and instead used Renderware, a popular engine at the time for the PlayStation 2 games. So everything was different. Adding to the change, one of the most talked about aspects of the game post-release was the voice acting, and not in a positive way. During recordings, many of the voice actors, most of whom were actually musicians rather than professional actors, received little direction, and even the game's HUD went through several changes during development, with at least 3 visual redesigns before the final release. Yet despite these tweaks, gaps in the HUD sprites were still noticeable in the finished product. How could these visual flaws persist in a game that underwent so many revisions? Was it a sign that Bloody Roar 4 was rushed, or did it indicate deeper issues in development? With these behind-the-scenes changes and challenges, did this all signal the beginning of the end for the beloved fighting franchise? Well, considering this is the last entry we got in the series, yes. Perhaps the difficult development process that surrounded the game impacted it somewhat. After all, the final release of Bloody Roar 4 was met with widespread criticism for its numerous bugs, unfinished elements, and glaring gameplay imbalances, from victory screens that lock the game to voice audio overlapping or going mute, and even character models phasing out of existence. The game felt riddled with technical issues. The AI was often called into question, with some fighters enjoying blatant advantages, like Mana's charge power or Busuzima's overpowered throw, making for an unbalanced and frustrating experience. As these problems came to light, speculation grew that Bloody Roar 4 had been rushed through development, leading to its drop in quality. But was this just a theory, or was there truth to the idea that the game was a victim of a chaotic production process? The evidence seems to support this. While Bloody Roar 4 was being developed, Bloody Roar Extreme was still in production, with the PAL version of Extreme released at the same time as Bloody Roar 4 in Europe. Could juggling 2 major projects have been too much for the team to handle? Adding to the pressure, Hudson was already dealing with financial losses, which led to the key resignations and ultimately the company's absorption by Konami. So aside from development hardships that were being faced, there were other problems as well. But what for the final product? Story-wise, taking place directly after Bloody Roar Extreme, during the Tabular incident, Nagi was mortally wounded while trying to stop Zeon, but survived by becoming a zoanthrope like him due to the power of the Unborn. Determined to return to normal, she sought out Zeon, but her actions only strengthened the Unborn's control over her mind. Together, under the Unborn's influence, Zeon and Nagi were tasked with weakening Gaia, Earth's life force, by destroying her greatest protector, Ryoho the Dragon. Unaware of his zoanthrope nature, Ryoho struggled to control his dragon form, which triggered destructive earthquakes across Tokyo. Mana, a Gaia priestess, sought help from the WOC to seal the dragon's power again, but they soon realised the Unborn was after them, led by Zeon. In a climactic battle at the underground temple, Ryoho transformed into the dragon. With Mana's help, he managed to regain control but collapsed, leaving him vulnerable to Zeon and Nagi. Yugo intervened just in time, defeating the Unborn's minions. Mana cast a spell that freed Zeon and Nagi from the Unborn's influence, and together they shattered the entity. As peace returned with the dragon sealed and the earthquake stopped, Ryoho revealed Gaia hadn't awakened the dragon to fight the Unborn but to protect herself from humanity, the real threat to the planet. This installment of Bloody Roar brings some major gameplay changes, but it's debatable whether they actually improve the experience or just overcomplicate things. The beast gauge remains a central feature, but now it can be charged using charge power by holding the beast button, at the cost of your health of course. While this gives you quicker access to beast form, it feels more like a trade-off that dilutes your strategy, especially since you no longer need a fully charged beast gauge to transform. The ease of beasterizing now takes away some of the tension that made the mechanic exciting in the previous games. The decision to intertwine the beast and health gauges also feels like a step back. When your health meter is depleted, you automatically transform into beast form, and your beast meter becomes your new health meter. If the beast meter runs out, you're forced back into human form. This automatic transformation removes any real decision making from the player, making it more like a safety net than a strategic choice. Gone are the days when a well-timed guard breaking attack would knock you out of beast form. Now it's all automated. Hyper Beast Mode's return doesn't fare much better. This time you have to drain all of your remaining health to trigger it, turning the mechanic into a desperate last resort rather than a tactical power-up. Staying in Hyper Beast mode for the rest of the round sounds great on paper, but it strips away the urgency of knowing when to use it. Then there's the new Career mode, which sounds interesting at first, but ends up being more tedious than rewarding. You earn DNA points by grinding through match after match, only to spend them on stat boosts or new moves. While unlocking new moves seems like a cool feature, it disrupts the character's flow, especially when borrowing moves from other fighters. The Career mode character can be used in regular play, but unlocking hidden characters requires amassing yet more DNA points, making the whole process feel like a grind. Ultimately, these changes feel like unnecessary overhauls than meaningful improvements, and many of them sacrifice the tension and strategy that made the earlier games fun. Whether this installment of Bloody Roar has truly evolved or simply added complexity for the sake of it is something players will have to decide upon for themselves. Unsurprisingly, reviews will be poor to mediocre, with this one ending up being the last Bloody Roar game ever made. However, what a lot of people don't know is that there was nearly another Bloody Roar game. In February 2011, fans were thrilled to hear that Hudson had quietly begun development on a new Bloody Roar game, marking the first installment in 8 long years. However, that flicker of hope was soon extinguished. Not long after the announcement, Hudson Soft ceased to exist, its legacy absorbed by Konami Digital Entertainment completely. And if you know anything about modern Konami, you know the story doesn't get brighter from here. By 2015, Konami's president Hideki Hayakawa publicly declared the company's pivot towards mobile gaming, famously stating that mobile is where the future of gaming lies. What a bastard. This shift signalled the end of an era for many beloved franchises, leaving fans of Bloody Roar wondering if they would ever see their favourite series return to glory. Before Hudson's doors closed for good in August 2011, former Hudson Entertainment manager Morgan Harrow took to his blog to offer a glimpse into what could have been. In a heartfelt post, Harrow explained the behind-the-scenes efforts to revive Bloody Roar. He wrote, "There was a chance for something to happen late 2011, early 2012, but clearly we won't see what was to be. To the Bloody Roar fans out there, I read every single one of your messages, petitions, and calls for the series to be brought back. You guys are awesome, and perhaps someday a developer and a publisher will pick it up and do it justice. Until then, just know you guys rock." The tragic part of this story is that those glimmers of hope, those internal discussions, those design documents were snuffed out before they could ever fully take shape. The Bloody Roar series was left in limbo, suspended between what could have been and what never will be, and yet a small flame still flickers. In March 2020, Konami filed a trademark application for Bloody Roar titles, but for those who have followed Konami's recent history, this news comes with a heavy sense of foreboding. Could this be a sign of a revival, or in a worst case scenario, be just another mobile cash grab, or a bloody raw pachinko machine? With the franchise in Konami's hands, the future feels uncertain, shrouded in the same fog that has kept the series dormant for so long. Bloody Raw, once a roaring beast in the fighting game world, now rests in the care of a company that may not understand its soul, but at the very least, we have fantastic memories of this once great franchise. Don't forget that I can get you up to 90% off of thousands of different AAA, modern, retro and indie titles simply by using my affiliate link, including big discounts on Street Fighter 6, Tekken 8 and the new Marvel vs. Capcom collection. Happy shopping, and each purchase supports the production of big videos like this. I'll see you all again very soon. Cheerio!